They call on Froggy Williams, who calmly boots an 18-yard pressure-packed field goal, and Rice beats Texas.
From out of nowhere comes Tommy Lewis, and Magel is tipped down.
The senior had one of the great season performances of all Southwest Conference history.
But look at these guys celebrating 19-17. The Owls going to beat Texas.
No quarterback and receiver have connected for more touchdowns in college football history.
Rising from barren land on the southern edge of the emerging city of Houston, Rice Institute was intended to create an institution of higher education that would become the finest in the South with a reputation for excellence that would reach not just nationally, but internationally. It was a rare opportunity to build an elite institution from the ground up, a task its earliest undergraduates fully understood.
When Rice started in 1912, it was starting absolutely and completely from scratch. There were no traditions, there was nothing built, it was like a newborn baby. And they were very, and President Lovett in particular, was very concerned that the institution fit into the life of the city. And also very concerned that the institution build its own set of traditions. The students were very focused on this also. They were very conscious of the fact that they were building a culture from the ground up.
While Rice Institute took shape, the nation was beginning to flex its economic muscle. Times were good, and an emerging middle class was looking for forms of entertainment. Unlike baseball, where the professional version held sway, the game of football was becoming increasingly popular as played on the collegiate level. Rice President Edgar Odell Lovett viewed football as the ideal offering to connect the Houston community with his school. 1 month after Rice welcomed its first freshman class to campus in 1912, members of that freshman class played Rice's first football game at Houston's West End Park.
You cannot think about the history of football at Rice without thinking about the history of the game of football. And that early era here was also an era of massive changes and evolution in the game of football itself. 1912, for example, the first year that Arbuckle coached here and the first year of the institution's existence, Pop Warner invented the single wing that year. There had been a whole cluster of changes in the rules of football that was made at the collegiate level the winter before. And the intention of this cluster of changes was to bring the forward pass and integrate it into, a normal offense.
College football had survived an attempt in 1905 to ban it because of its violent nature. President Theodore Roosevelt interceded, and a committee led by legendary coach Walter Camp created a series of rule changes that allowed the game to morph from its rugby roots to a wide-open hybrid that struck a chord with the public. Players such as Jim Thorpe, who would earn his second Walter Camp All-America honor the same year Rice opened, became mythical figures. The game grew nationally to a stage where the first postseason bowl games were created to match universities to try to settle the issue of who was truly the top team. To guide Rice's entry into this expanding universe, Lovett turned to an innovative mind who had established Southwestern University as an early power. Philip Arbuckle came to Rice to teach English and history, as was the norm of the day, but also to impart his innovative approach to the game on his young Rice charges. Arbuckle believed that through spacing and deception, his relatively inexperienced Rice squad could find success. His kind, scholarly, even-mannered approach to coaching football proved to be a perfect match for his scholarly football neophytes.
He quickly had success with a very small group of people. The first year that we played, all we had was freshmen. Virtually every male student on campus came out for the football team because if they didn't, we wouldn't have enough people to play. So he went out and very cleverly in the first year only played a couple of smaller colleges and some high schools. So they were able to learn his system. He was able to have initial success, which, as I said, quickly caught the interest of the community.
Just how quickly Rice's athletic initiative emerged became obvious on December 8, 1914, when members of Rice's Committee on Outdoor Sports, along with their brethren from 7 other colleges, met at Houston's Rice Hotel and established the Southwest Intercollegiate Athletic Conference. In just 2 short years, the fledgling school on the southern edge of Houston joined with Texas, Texas A&M, Oklahoma, Oklahoma A&M, Arkansas, Baylor, and Arbuckle's former school, Southwestern, to form a league that would soon establish its place with the top conferences in the nation. Arbuckle would coach the Owls through 1923, compiling a 52-30-8 record, with 1 year off for military service during World War I in 1918. The year he returned to campus proved to be his finest, as the Owls finished 8-1 and finished second in the conference. As it developed an identity on the field, Rice's other traditions began to take shape. School colors of navy and gray were established at the onset. The first nicknamed the Grays did not have as long a tenure. With the Athenia owl figuring so prominently in the Rice School crest, fans soon referred to the team in kind. Along with cheerleaders, the student body sought for a way to represent their new nickname at sporting events. The caricature of the owl began as a 6-foot, 200-pound figure made of canvas. Students would proudly haul the weighty symbol at football games and other athletic events. In 1917, the Texas A&M basketball team kidnapped the unattended owl from the gymnasium hallway and spirited the hostage back to College Station. Outraged Rice students seethed at the theft by a hated rival. The Aggies made no secret of their deed. The owl was immediately inducted into the Corps of Cadets, and the school president posed for a photo. Rice student leaders hired a private investigator who sent word back to Houston that Sammy, the agreed-upon code word for their symbol, had been located in College Station.
The Rice students go up there in 2 old Fords and a Hudson to kidnap the owl back. They get their hands on it, but then this crazy pell-mell through the Texas countryside chase happens with, half the Corps is coming after them. There's a train involved. The Corps takes over the entire town of Navasota, takes over the telephone lines, takes over the telegraph, sets up roadblocks, and in the end, 4 Rice students get away with a piece of the canvas from the owl and bring it back to campus. Their photograph is made with everyone, and this is the triumph over the Aggies and the foundation for the Sammy that they've had ever since.
While the rivalry between the schools returned to the field of play, the reminder of this incident is never far away, as the Owls mascot remains known to one and all as Sammy. Back on the football field, Arbuckle was producing players who would become immortal through their contributions both on the field and in the classroom. Tiny Cobb, a member of the first team in 1912, was an outstanding multi-sport athlete as well as the editor of the first yearbook. And he became the first athlete of Rice's initial freshman class to be inducted into the Rice Hall of Fame when it began in 1970. Shirley Brick, the star of the 1919 team, which lost only once, was Rice's first All-Southwest Conference player and first Owl to play in the fledgling National Football League. And there was Eddie Dyer, a member of the early Rice football teams who went on to make his mark in baseball, reaching the majors as a player and then as a manager, leading the 1946 St. Louis Cardinals to a World Series championship. When Rice was faced with a coaching change after the 1923 season, the Committee on Outdoor Sports yearned to make headlines with the selection of their next coach. The long, exhaustive search led them to John W. Heisman. Heisman was an innovator in his own right, who had successful stints at a number of schools, including Auburn, Clemson, and Georgia Tech, where he won a mythical national championship in 1917. Heisman's hire marked a change in philosophy for the football program. While the soft-spoken Arbuckle was a member of the faculty, Heisman was hired solely to coach football and immediately demanded changes designed to enhance his football teams.
We're also in a time period where when enrollment is growing, there's stress on the budget, there's stress on the facilities, there aren't enough faculty, there aren't enough classroom spaces. And this guy in the football program wants more money, better facilities, and a break academically for his players. That wasn't going to happen. The boosters in town, many of whom were major donors to Rice, they were running out of patience. and insisted that a change be made. The change that they made is the same change that they always make, which was to get rid of the coach rather than actually address the structural problems that are at the heart of the issue.
It proved to be Heisman's last stop in a Hall of Fame coaching career. After the 1927 season, he moved to New York City, becoming the athletic director of the Downtown Athletic Club. In 1935, that club began to honor the top college football player in the country. And when Heisman died in 1936, the club chose to honor him by affixing his name to their award, and the Heisman Trophy entered into the public's conscience. Even with the varied level of success on the field, a dedicated following of loyal supporters hung on every result. Ye Olde College Inn, located across Main Street from the Rice campus, was an oasis for the Rice community, since the city of Houston had yet to encompass the Rice area. Ye Olde College Inn's owner, George Martin, hosted victory celebrations and consoled Al fans in defeat within its cozy walls. Along the way, Rice heroes and noted visitors began to carve their names into one of the tables at the inn. College football legends, including Heisman, Jim Thorpe, Pop Warner, and Bear Bryant, to name just a few, affixed their names to the table, which became known to all as the Coach's Table. In 1926, Martin began honoring Rice's most valuable player with an award that now bears his name.
It became almost immediate with tremendous honor and drew a lot of attention to it. And you know, people worked really hard, coveted that award. I think the reason that it's lasted so long is that, you know, at a small school, at a school that sometimes has not had success on the field to really bind people together, it really does become a deeper and more personal attachment that, you know, you don't just toss that away.
Winners were presented a shotgun as Martin Award winners for many years. Today, winners receive a trophy, but all are bonded as winners of Rice's oldest athletic honor. A tradition that began when wash-heavy Underwood won the first of 2 consecutive MVP awards in 1926 links Rice's earliest standouts to their brethren today. By the mid-1930s, Rice's leaders and supporters sought to address issues they felt were impeding the success of the football team. Rice was still a newcomer on the college scene without an established athletic tradition, and recruitment of athletes was not yet a generally accepted practice across the country. Rice adhered to the strictest of academic standards and was steadfast in not bending them to accommodate athletes. At the same time, there was a cry to address the glaring shortage of qualified teachers and coaches to guide the swelling population of the region. The solution? Create a physical education program funded solely by the Houston business community that did not deviate from Rice's high academic standards, but also met the mission of the school to impact its community in a positive way. President Lovett agreed, and within a few years of its launch in 1929, the program would reap benefits for Rice in both regards.
We did begin to produce better graduation rates and student athletes who went on to have solid careers in Texas high schools, which later set us up for recruiting success in the state.
Rice Institute had made remarkable strides in its first 20 years. The Roaring 20 saw it enter the national conversation both academically and athletically. But the strength of that foundation would be severely tested when the stock market crashed and America lapsed into what would become the Great Depression. Over the next 20 years, as the country struggled to rebound and the world raced full speed to an even larger global conflict, Rice proved to be a model of progress, providing larger groups of students the finest education and sports fans throughout the region a vital diversion from their daily challenges. Against a backdrop of economic depression at home and ominous political changes abroad, Rice Institute entered its third decade as a vibrant oasis, where a new generation of leaders were honing skills that would soon be tested far greater than any could have imagined. On the football field, a wider array of talented players who were not dissuaded by Rice's academic challenges were gathering on campus, And soon enough, the Bayou City would get its first moment in the national gridiron spotlight. Thanks to the adoption of a physical education program, head coach Jack Mahar had begun to attract more and more talented players to South Main, winning 8 games in 1930, 7 in 1932, and shut out Texas in consecutive seasons. However, he moved on to coach at Auburn after the 1933 season, and it fell to Jimmy Kitts, who had originally come to Rice to coach basketball, to realize the full results of Mahar's work. Kitts earned his reputation on the basketball court both as a star player at SMU and as a high school coach when he led Athens, Texas to a pair of national titles. But he proved to be a quick study when it came to coaching football. In his first year at the helm, Kitts led the Owls to their first Southwest Conference championship, finishing with a 9-1-1 record overall. And if not for an early 9-9 tie with LSU and an upset 7-2 loss to TCU in the second-to-last game of the year, the Owls might have found themselves in contention for the Rose Bowl. This group of Owls were no doubt Rice's greatest team to not reach postseason play. As a team, the Owls made their first foray into the top ranks of the national polls, finishing 5th in the Dickinson rankings. Individually, Bill Wallace made an equally impressive national splash, becoming the first Owl to earn All-American honors. John McCauley teamed with Wallace in the backfield, and the duo jointly became Rice's first 2-time All-Southwest Conference selections. Wallace's impact on the game was significant enough that in 1978, he was inducted into the College Football Hall of Fame. In fact, a total of 8 players on the 1934 team would go on to be inducted into the Rice Athletic Hall of Fame, including future Rice Athletic Director Red Bale, who dedicated most of his professional life to his school as both the coach and administrator. The 1934 Owls were truly worthy of postseason play. However, with the Sugar and Orange Bowl still on the drawing board for the following season, there were no options available. At various times, there had been a Dixie Classic played in Dallas, but it had shut down the year before. It was in 1936 when Dallas oil man J. Curtis Stanford announced the creation of a game that would become the ultimate goal for generations of gritters throughout the region. The Cotton Bowl began with modest intentions, and the initial contest between TCU and Marquette lost money. But spurred on by the rapidly strengthening national prestige of the Southwest Conference, it would quickly grow into a national treasure.
It was the second playing of the Cotton Bowl, and we beat Colorado 28-14, and it set off a bit of a football frenzy back in Houston, and sort of led to the second step in the upward trajectory.
Kitts' Owls follow their memorable 1934 season by winning 13 games the next 2 years and opened 1937 with a pair of shutout losses and a tie. But just when it appeared the season was in jeopardy, sophomore quarterback Ernie Lane sparked the Owls to go 6-1-1 over the final 8 games to capture their second Southwest Conference title in 4 years and a berth in the second Cotton Bowl. Rice's reward for its late season surge was the chance to face an unbeaten Colorado team, led by one of college football's immortal figures, Byron Whizzer White. Lane had garnered recognition of his own as Grantland Rice dubbed him college football's greatest sophomore back. In front of a crowd of 32,188 fans, that nearly double the size of the previous year's crowd who watched Sammy Baugh lead TCU to a win in the first Cotton Bowl, both Lane and White lived up to their billing. White sparked the Buffaloes to a quick 14-0 lead in the first quarter, the second score coming on an interception of Lane. But Lane shook off the slow start and threw 3 touchdowns and rushed for a 4th to turn Rice's first bowl experience into a winning one, 28-14. It would be nearly 50 years before Boston College's Doug Flutie would knock Lane's 3 TD passes off the Cotton Bowl record book. White would soon leave football behind to begin a stellar career practicing law that eventually led him to a seat on the U.S. Supreme Court. 2 years after his second conference crown, Kitts would leave Rice for Virginia Tech in the aftermath of winning just 1 game in 1939. Kitts' departure was hardly the news of the day, as war had broken out in Europe, and Americans who were still breaking free from the shackles of the Depression now were confronted with knowledge they could not stand on the sidelines of this conflict for long. The Owls football program had tasted great success, and the man who would follow Kitts and guide them through the challenges of the war years and onto even greater heights was wrapping up his most successful season with Clemson with a win in the Cotton Bowl. it would not be the last time Jess Neely brought home the Sanford Trophy as Cotton Bowl champions. Neely had been a star player at Vanderbilt before embarking on his coaching career. From the first moment he stepped on campus, his focus and meticulous preparation, combined with a stern dose of discipline, earned the immediate respect of his players, despite the whirlwind of events taking place throughout the world. Over 27 remarkable seasons, Neely established himself as the most iconic figure in Rice football history. 4 times in a 12-year stretch, his Owls won at least a share of the conference title. He led the Owls to the Cotton, Orange, and Sugar Bowls, capturing 3 bowl championships, posted 14 winning seasons, and saw his Owls ranked as high as 5th in the national polls. Neely developed 11 All-Americans and 43 All-Southwest Conference players, including All-American and 3-time All-Conference player Joe Watson, the most decorated interior lineman in Rice history, and Weldon Humble, an All-American and 2-time All-Conference player who went on to become the Owls' first inductee into the National Football Foundation Hall of Fame. Neely also sent a generation of future captains of industry into the business world, battle-tested and well-prepared to launch careers that have shaped much of the business landscape of the region.
If you look through the old files, the correspondence about the hiring, they talk about Neely's ability as a coach, but even more than that, they talk about something that the Rice people are also deeply concerned about, and that is his character. They talk about his commitment to the students as students. They talk about his honesty, his integrity, and his good nature. And that seems to have been a huge factor in why he was hired here.
He was a good man. He was a good coach. I can tell you that he did well. Of course, Neely's pretty secure with his record. You don't have to defend Neely on anything because his record's laid out there for everybody to see. He get right down and point, and I want you to do this. That's all I want you to do is that. And it wasn't a screamer, but it was certainly put out that you knew he meant what he was talking about.
The launch of the Neely era was marked by both great success and grim reality. The Owls went 13-5-1 over his first 2 seasons, capped by a 6-0 win at SMU to end the 1941 campaign. But any chance to savor the end to that season was cut short the following day, when the nation was shocked to be told that Japan had launched a sneak attack on U.S. armed forces at Pearl Harbor. Ready or not, America was again in the middle of a global conflict. Neely and all his fellow college coaches had to work around wavering rosters and players being called to military duty. While some schools opted not to field teams during the war, Neely's Owls found a modest level of success against a schedule that included teams from local military bases that sometimes featured former teammates and rivals. Weldon Humble earned national honors at Rice in 1942, then found himself earning All-American honors at Southwestern Louisiana Institute, now Louisiana Lafayette, while continuing his military training, and then returning to Rice after the war to earn consensus All-American honors in 1946. Guard H.J. Nichols would become Neely's first Rice All-American after opening huge holes for running back George Walmsley, who became the first Owl to lead the Southwest Conference in rushing. Countless Owls went on to serve their country in the war. When hostilities came to an end in 1945, many returned home ready to resume their studies as well as their football careers.
You had football players, played 2 years of college ball, went to service, played 2 more years, and then came back. They were veterans. They'd played 4, some of them 5 years. I didn't understand it at the time, the complexity and the situation, but those guys were great. The football, but then again, the whole era, the whole football programs, they were all that way. Texas had a great team. SMU had a great team. And that's what it was all about. Those dead young people came back, and they were all over the place.
Post-war America was bursting at the seams with a pent-up energy caused by years of sacrifice and rationing. Americans wanted to get out, spend money, and revel in their freedom. College football was only too ready to provide the entertainment. Neely's 1946 Owls opened with a 1-point loss to LSU, but then rolled to 9 wins in the last 10 games to hand their coach his first Southwest Conference crown and earn a date in the Orange Bowl against his home state university, Tennessee. The matchup was a study in contrasts. The Vols were led by legendary coach Bob Neyland, who stubbornly held on to his old school ways, including leather helmets. Neely's team wore new plastic helmets and brought a modern approach to the field as well. The war veterans who were the backbone of the Owls determined to close their season with a statement, but they were equally determined to enjoy the fruits of their labor with the trip to Miami.
Those guys, all of that 42 team went to the Marines. They spent in the Pacific. They were over there 4 years, killing Japanese all over the place. They wanted to have some fun, and they did. Neely backed down, he did.
The final score of 8-0 hardly told the story of the Owls' dominance over the Vols. Carl Russ and Hugh Keeney combined on a 50-yard touchdown on the Owls' second series, and they added a safety on a blocked punt later in the quarter. After that, Neely was content to call off the Dogs and let the defense hold his home state university in check to register Rice's only shutout bowl victory. A happy group of Owls, with all missions in Miami accomplished, headed home with a final ranking of number 10 in the nation. While 1947 and 48 were winning seasons, they also were the testing ground for a group of players who would take the Owls to their greatest season in 1949. Led by All-Americans Joe Watson, two-time All-Conference standout James Froggy Williams, and Tobin Rote, the only man to quarterback a team to both NFL and AFL titles, the 1949 Owls were undefeated Southwest Conference champions and recorded Rice's first ever 10-win season, a feat that would not be duplicated for 59 years. The Owls' march to the title included wins over 3 conference foes who had won their bowl games after the 1948 season, as well as one of the most electrifying comebacks in Rice gridiron annals. Down 15-0 to Texas, the Owls stormed back to score 17 unanswered points, culminating with a game-winning field goal by Froggy Williams.
When it was so bad at the half, Neely changed and put in a guy named Vernon Glass. In the middle of the third quarter, he put him in, and he got 2 touchdowns and a field goal. So what can I say? He was great, and I'm a hero. Everybody thinks that's where I got all the credit, and that wasn't me. The guy that won the game was Vernon Glass.
While the drama of the Texas win resonates with Rice fans this day, Williams and his teammates regarded the win 1 week earlier over an SMU team that had won the previous 2 Southwest Conference titles as the game that defined their season.
My best game was the SMU game. SMU had won it 2 years in a row. They were favored to win it. And we got up and we said, that was the team we had to beat.
Facing the legendary Doak Walker, who had won the Heisman Trophy the year before, the Owls fell behind 14-0 in Dallas, only to storm back and take a 41-27 shootout. Rice's 10th win came in the Cotton Bowl, where Billy Burkhalter scored both through the air and on the ground, and Williams grabbed the final TD reception of his illustrious career to provide the offense as the Owls blasted through North Carolina 27-13 and finished 5th in both the AP and UPI polls. Neely's unprecedented success had generated intense interest in Houston, and that interest now overwhelmed Rice's current football home. The original Rice Stadium had grown from a simple structure surrounding the racetrack on the corner of University and Main, but there were only so many places to jam in additional temporary seats. To the burgeoning group of Rice businessmen, the only solution was a new stadium, one that was a symbolic statement of the success that Neely's teams were achieving on the field. Days after winning the Cotton Bowl, a bond drive was launched to reach that goal, and in only a few weeks, all of the $100 bonds were sold and shovels were in the ground. Led by George R. Brown, whose company Brown & Root took on the challenge, community leaders committed to a staggering project, both in scope with 70,000 seats and in time frame to be ready for the 1950 season. But showcasing the same legendary determination that was Texas's calling card throughout the world, the project was completed on time as Rice welcomed Orange Bowl champion Santa Clara to its new Showplace Stadium on September 30th, 1950. An architectural marvel, Rice Stadium was built for watching football. Its sightlines remain the standard against which other stadiums are measured to this day.
We didn't get to play in that stadium, but we built it. We tell everybody we built it. And it was really true. We were number 5 in the nation, which is pretty good. They put out those intent to buy bonds, and they sent them out, and it was oversubscribed. It stunned them. I don't think they ever started out thinking that would be sitting there, because they didn't think they'd get that much money. But the money just flowed in.
It was so much excitement in the community about this that they actually set up bleachers on the site, but behind a chain link fence, so that like, people who lived in West U on their way home from work would stop and park their car, climb up in the bleachers and watch the construction crews working, because they were working almost completely around the clock in order to get it built.
In its first 2 seasons, Rice Stadium saw the Owls win 7 of 11 home contests and produce an All-American of its own in high-flying wide receiver Billy Houghton, who became the first of a string of Rice receivers who were selected to carry on the tradition Froggy Williams had established by having Coach Red Bale switch his uniform number from 81 to 84 for his senior year. Houghton went on to further establish number 84 by earning All-American honors of his own.
Red is the one responsible for that. And he told me about it one day when he first started. He said he recruited 2 or 3 people. I don't remember who they were, Houghton and Buddy, but there are about 2 or 3 other all-conference guys that had 84. Red recruited them and gave them that number.
The opening of Rice Stadium represented the dawn of a new day for Rice football. At the same time, college football was entering a new day as well. Freshmen who had been eligible for varsity play in the years immediately after the war were now not allowed to play varsity football. Rice fans would soon learn to check the schedule for the Rice Owlets, because an exciting new crop of players who would soon make their own mark on the college landscape were taking their first steps into college football. In the last 20 years, Rice had gone from never playing in a bowl to winning 3, and from being an unknown to being a team comfortably placed in the highest levels of the rankings. It had sent its sons off to war and welcomed them home. America was about to blast through a decade of change, one that would see technology advance at frightening speed and society itself following just behind. Jess Neely would be there to guide his ever-changing list of young men through the dazzling change that was ahead, before eventually calling it a career. It would be a time no Rice fan and no player under Neely would ever forget. Rice football entered the 1950s no longer playing catch-up to its larger rival schools. Thanks to overwhelming support, the construction of their new home stadium made Rice the envy of their Southwest Conference brethren. The formidable structure would prove to be the catalyst to some of the most memorable seasons in Rice history and cement Jess Neely's reputation as one of football's legendary coaches. However, it didn't start out that way. A 5-5 season in 1951 was followed by a 1-5 start to the 1952 campaign. And ironically, it was on the road and not at home where the Owls salvaged their season. Rice closed out the year winning its last 4, including 3 road contests at Arkansas, Texas A&M, and Baylor to set the stage for a memorable 1953. Their strong finish, bolstered by a formidable roster of returning talent, led by running backs Cossie Johnson and Dickie Magel, and linemen John Hudson, Kenny Paul, and Richard Chapman, made the Owls the preseason pick for the Southwest Conference crown. The Owls would go on to prove them right.
Those days, Rice went to a bowl game about every 4th year. And so if you won a bowl game, then the next year's freshman class would have a lot of good players on it. And I think things started going apart when Rice quit winning the bowl game. So it was extremely important to the program.
They won 8 of 10 regular season games, falling only to SMU and to Bear Bryant's Kentucky Wildcats. Though they tied Texas for the conference title, the Owls earned the Cotton Bowl berth thanks to a 20-13 win over the Longhorns at Rice Stadium. Johnson and Hudson were named All-Americans on the field, and Chapman became the first Al to earn academic All-American honors. But the Cotton Bowl meeting with Alabama would provide a stage for their teammate Megill to enter into college football lore with one of the most memorable performances, anchored by one of the most distinctive plays in the history of the game. After Alabama took a 6-0 lead after one quarter, Megill shredded the Tide defense for a 79-yard scoring run. Moments later, starting from his own 5, Megill was again leaving Bama defenders in the dust. With his eyes focused on the remaining defenders who might challenge him, as well as the on-rushing Chapman who was looking to spring him with a final block, Megill was hardly concerned with any movement along the Alabama sideline as he sprinted upfield. But from out of that sideline burst Tommy Lewis, who had earlier scored the Tide's first touchdown. Lewis dropped Megill in his tracks, then quickly returned to a seat on the bench. The stunned referees ruled that Megill would be credited with a 95-yard TD. In the blink of an eye, an incredible run in its own right was elevated to a moment that became an iconic play in the history of college football. The play did the impossible, making Megill's final total of 265 yards on just 11 carries a footnote in the recounting of the game. But it also proved to be the springboard for Megill, who became an All-American and a first-round draft pick 1 year later.
They said that they thought I could have blocked him. If I had the man behind Dickie, might have caught up with him. I don't know. But I was the only one in the stadium who did not know what had happened. I did not see the off-bench tackle.
Megill and the Owls looked to earn a return berth to the Cotton Bowl in 1954, but they could not overcome a 28-15 road loss at Arkansas. They finished 7-3, ending the season ranked 19th in both the AP and UPI polls. Richard Chapman was named All-Southwest Conference and Academic All-American for a second consecutive year. The 1955 season opened with promise, as the media again tabbed the Owls as the conference favorite. But after 2 wins and a tie to open the year, things went astray, and they dropped the last 7 games of the season. In 1956, Rice opened with back-to-back wins over LSU and Alabama, but dropped its last 4 conference games to finish 4-6. While there were glimpses of talent, few could have predicted heading into 1957 that Neely and Stav had some magic up their sleeves. Led by the double-barreled attack of King Hill and Frank Ryan, who would both go on to play quarterback in the NFL, the Owls caught fire down the stretch after a 3-3 start. After downing Arkansas, they welcomed Bear Bryant and his top-ranked Texas A&M Aggies to Rice Stadium. While rumors during the week circulated that Bryant had been meeting with officials from Alabama about their head coaching job, the Owls were preparing on the field to spring a trap and off the field for a massive turnout that would require installing temporary bleachers. The sellout crowd of better than 73,000 witnessed a classic. Hill intercepted a pair of passes and constantly pinned the Aggies down with his punting. But it was his extra point after an Owls touchdown in the first half that proved to be the difference in a 7-6 win that touched off a celebration for the ages on the campus on South Main.
Coach Bryant was more bitter about the 57 Rice loss than any other game that he ever coached. I visited him 10 years after he went back to Alabama. He was staying at the Shamrock Hilton. I went to his suite, and in the middle of our conversation, he got up and walked to the window, and it was overlooking the Rice campus. And he said, "Damn it, I told that desk clerk I didn't want a window that overlooked that damn stadium."
On the strength of his performance in this epic game, Hill earned All-America honors and went on to be the overall #1 pick in the NFL draft. Following their big win, the Owls did not let their guard down the final 2 weeks of the year, blanking TCU and Baylor by identical 20-0 scores to earn their last berth in the Cotton Bowl. It would be difficult to talk about the 1950s and the Jess Neely era without noting the work of loyal assistant coaches who've gone on to make their place in Rice gridiron annals. Red Bale, a Rice alum and a longtime Neely aide, went on to serve the department as administrator. Joe Davis was a fixture at Rice for 27 years and earned the nickname Bloody Joe. And there was Bo Hagan, a 13-year assistant who went on to replace Neely in 1967. The 1960s are now heralded as a decade of great change, and change was certainly in the air as the decade began. After 48 years of being known as Rice Institute, the school officially became known as Rice University in 1960. On the gridiron, the blue and gray turned in back-to-back 7 and 4 seasons and earned consecutive bowl appearances for the only time in school history. The Owls were surprise entrants in the 1961 Sugar Bowl, where they battled an Ole Miss squad that was battling for a share of the national title. Led by All-America quarterback Jake Gibbs, the Rebels were prohibitive favorites against the Owls, who entered the game with 3 losses. But Ole Miss quickly learned that their opponents from Houston were not interested in participating in a coronation. Rice dominated play for most of the game, but could only turn 1 of 5 trips to the red zone into points, and a late scoring run by Giggs sealed a 14-6 Ole Miss win.
We weren't favored, but I don't know about public sentiment, but there was no sentiment like that amongst ourselves. Back then, football was a very popular sport at Rice, and I had quite a few friends who were academics, as we call them, and there was a great, Rice turned out probably a lot larger percentage of its students than Ole Miss did of its.
Less than a year later, Rice earned a consecutive bowl berth for the first time in its history. But the berth was bittersweet, since a berth in the Bluebonnet Bowl meant playing an extra game in their home stadium and staying in their campus quarters rather than traveling to another city. The 33-7 loss to Kansas would prove to be the Owls' last bowl appearance for 45 years, even though the following season the Owls, led by All-American center Malcolm Walker, were poised to meet Oregon in the 1963 Sun Bowl on the heels of a 6-4 season. But the team voted not to accept the bid, and it was rival SMU who trucked to El Paso and upset the Ducks. While Rice Stadium has not proved to be an ideal location for the Owls to go bowling, it was becoming an historical landmark for other activities. In September of 1962, President John F. Kennedy had challenged the nation to land a man on the moon by the end of the decade. Houston's reputation in the world was now growing at a breakneck pace. Locally, Houston was no longer a one-team town. Where once Rice football had been a solitary stalwart in the collective conscience of Houston, the city now had multiple sporting options. First, there was the Houston Oilers of the fledgling AFL, followed quickly by the birth of the first Major League Baseball franchise south of the Mason-Dixon line. A few miles east of South Main, the University of Houston was making a rapid ascension of its own on the college football landscape. Rice Stadium's decade-long dominance as Houston's signature sporting venue was about to be eclipsed by a new structure, rising out of the earth just a few miles further south off of Main Street. The Astrodome, as it would soon be called, would prove to be a promoter's dream, both for the building itself and for the community, who sought to use its technological advances as further proof of Houston's place at the center of the new technological world.
You would see that almost 75% of those season ticket holders here all of a sudden start shifting, and their corporations and business start going to the Astrodome. You know, Oilers played here for a while, but University of Houston all of a sudden became a respected university at the time as far as athletically. A tremendous difference in what the city had to offer, and of course then you have the Astros come on board and the Rockets, and all of a sudden there was a whole lot of competition for your entertainment dollar.
In the midst of all this rapid change and rise of competition, administrators at Rice faced their own economic realities in 1965 and discontinued the practice of offering free tuition. This change had an immediate impact on the number of scholarships that could be offered, a challenge that a younger coach might have chosen to fight publicly. But not Jess Neely, who stoically accepted this development, as he had all the others in his nearly 3 decades of service to the school. His last teams were never short of individual talent, only short of a high enough quantity of talent. That talent rose up on occasion to give the Owls memorable moments, such as the upset of defending national champion Texas in Austin in 1965. But those moments were becoming fewer and far between, and it was announced that the 1966 season would be his last. Neely's final team provided a sparkling debut with a 17-15 upset win over an LSU team that had finished 1965 ranked 8th in the nation. However, 7 straight losses followed, 4 of them by no more than a touchdown. But his dedicated seniors made sure his last day on the sidelines at Rice Stadium would be memorable, presenting him a 21-10 win over TCU, the 144th of Jess Neely's career at Rice.
I don't know a coach who didn't respect Coach Neely. And, you know, he had been here a long time, and I still recall how controversial it was when Rice decided that it was time to move on. And Coach Neely, whatever age he was, late 60s, was nowhere near ready to stop coaching. The players, you know, loved him as much as you can love a coach, and played for him with all their hearts. And I don't think anybody ever accused Jess Neely of being unfair.
Following a legend is never easy, but Bo Hagan knew that following Jess Neely's legacy was only part of the challenge he had in front of him. While Hagan's success was modest, especially in comparison to those who followed him, the Hagan era was significant in many ways, in that it ushered in a significant culture change when in 1968, 3 African-American players were included in his recruiting class. Mike Tyler, Rodrigo Roy Barnes, and Staley Vincent came to Rice for the same challenge as their fellow freshman recruits. They wanted to test themselves in one of the nation's top football conferences while gaining an education at one of the nation's finest universities. But each also knew that they were also opening a door for the first time for generations to come. Vincent would make history as the first African-American quarterback in the Southwest Conference, and all 3 would go on to prosper both on and off the field.
At that time, it was a big challenge. Rice University, a very prestigious institution with a history of being excellent, and also a history of being segregated. So they decided to integrate. I was offered the challenge academically and the opportunity to play in the Southwest Conference.
At that time, it was insignificant because here's my dream. I'm going to go there and I'm going to do this. And that was my dream. And everything else just kind of, followed me, after I made that decision. But it didn't deter me. But also it didn't cause me to feel any differently about myself, like, hey, everybody look at me, I'm the first. That wasn't the case.
Some of their teammates at that time were players that were not only standouts on the field of play, but served their school in leadership roles after their playing days. All-conference players Bucky Allshouse and Jay Collins are current members of the Rice Board of Trustees. Leland Winston serves as the Owls team physician. Roger Royce was an all-conference standout.
It was just a great experience, and not one thing particularly stands out. Camaraderie. And after I got drafted, this is one thing that kind of stands out to me. And I went up to Denver, and I was there, and they were nice guys, but they just weren't the caliber that I was used to. And I don't want to say anything more than that, other than I was spoiled.
Hagan rebounded from a winless 1968 season to win 2 of his last 3 in 1969 and set the stage for optimism in 1970. That optimism provided some cover for growing sentiment about the need for a change in direction, but the expectation for success in 1970 was clear. However, one of Hagan's key components for that success, Barnes, would not be able to be by his coach's side for the 1970 season. Even without Barnes, the Owls closed with a rush, beating Texas A&M, TCU, and Baylor in their final 3 games to finish at 5-5. But it was not enough to save Hagan. Despite his key role in advancing the program, Hagan was not retained as head coach, and university leadership decided it was necessary to make an investment in the program to improve the school's gridiron fortunes.
That was the year that I think that I would have made a significant difference. And I think that we would have been successful, and probably he would have had a great opportunity to hang on. He was a very, very good man. I liked him a lot. He's a good coach. That year, I think we would have been successful.
Construction of a then state-of-the-art end-zone training facility as well as the R-Room was underway and would open in 1972. And the Owls went across the country to Florida State to attract a proven winner in head coach Bill Peterson. Peterson's tenure at Rice brought great attention, as well as great interest from recruits all over the country who wanted to play in his NFL-style attack in a conference that seemed to churn out national title contenders each year. But Peterson's pro-style approach was also a culture shock to many on the team. On top of it all, Peterson consented to allow a writer total access to the team that year for a book that would prove to be troubling to members of the Owls. Peterson's arrival also provided the spark to bring Houston and Rice together on the field for the first time. And a sellout crowd saw the underdog Owls throw a major scare into the Cougars. The season was noted by the overall performance of an Owls team that battled injuries to keep many games close and saw it close with a 23-0 win over Baylor. But ultimately, the Peterson era was marked by the way it ended as suddenly as it began, when he was hired to take his coaching talents a short drive down South Main when he was hired to take over as coach of the Houston Oilers.
Rice's idea of big time was, let's go back to Jess Neely. And I think that's exactly what they thought. We may have made a mistake with Bo Hagan. He wasn't as excitement-filled offense as we thought. He was successful in the field. So let's go out and get a big-name coach. Bill Peterson was a big-name coach. You know, can you imagine getting the coach from Florida to take the head job at Rice, you know? And yet he was very attracted to it, thought he could be successful, was going to bring the passing game, a whole new era, and a tremendous amount of support for the transition at that time. So yes, it was a commitment, and it was going to be, we're going to do it, we're going back big time, we're going to be successful, and we're going to make it work.
In 20 years, Rice had gone from a single dominant entertainment option to being one of many options in a town that continued to grow on a world stage. In the next 20 years, Rice would become more challenged to keep up with its Southwest Conference mates and keep itself in front of a growing and diverse local population, while never straying from its academic mission. The results would be varied, but at the end of the journey, Rice stood poised to once again prove that athletics and academics need not be conflicting elements, but complementary parts of a worthy mission. The seniors who made up the 1972 Rice Owls football team entered the season confronted by perpetual change. They entered their final fall camp under the direction of their third head coach in as many years and found the depth chart crowded by an incoming class of talented freshmen, the result of an aggressive national effort by departed head coach Bill Peterson. Thanks to a change of NCAA rules, these yearlings stepped onto the field for the first day of practice with unlimited expectations. None of the veterans could bank on the kind of seniority normally afforded players of their rank. Peterson's surprising arrival 1 year earlier had been a jolt to the status quo on South Main. So his equally surprising departure left a program once defined by the stability of its coaching regime shaken. Players who had bought into the adoption of a pro-style attack under Peterson or were recruited for the same system found they need not worry about a radical shift in the playbook when the Owls elevated Al Conover, who had been one of Peterson's top assistants, to the head coaching position. Known for his sharp offensive mind as well as a quick wit and a flair for the dramatic, Conover was well equipped to hone the assembled talent as well as assume the role as the face of the program.
I had a great bunch of players here, guys that I was attached to. And they wanted to keep the system, you know. They liked the pro passing game and so on. And I kept some of the staff and then brought in some others, but by and large, it made the transition easier.
His debut proved to be one that few Rice coaches could ever hope to top. A crowd of 52,000 gathered at Rice Stadium to witness Conover's Owls debut against Houston. With the knowledge that the United States had lost the gold medal in Olympic basketball earlier the same day, they should have known they were in for a wild finish of their own. Holding a 14-13 lead in the game's final moments, the Owls were forced to withstand one final charge by Houston, stopping them at the goal line as time expired.
Bill Yeoman, the coach then at U of H, decides instead of kicking a field goal, they're going to just run their veer and score. And the Rice defense just stuffed it, and we won the game. And I think I hit my head on the ceiling on a water pipe jumping up in the locker room. And
the Owls would beat Clemson the following week and then tie Georgia Tech to keep Conover unbeaten in its first 3 games. The Owls would endure a mid-season 4-game losing streak before winning 3 of the last 4 to finish 5-5-1, their best mark in 9 years. 1 year later, Conover posted the Owls' first winning record in the Southwest Conference since 1963, thanks to a 4-game winning streak to end the year. Conover's teams could count on a number of dynamic individual talents whose football careers would extend beyond their days on South Main. Linebacker Rodrigo Barnes was a nightmare for opposing coaches, combining size and speed that allowed him to dominate from a variety of spots on the field before moving on to an NFL career that included a Super Bowl title with the Oakland Raiders. Tight end Gary Butler was a 2-time All-Southwest Conference selection and a second-round pick of the Kansas City Chiefs. Defensive back Bruce Henley and defensive lineman Cornelius Walker were also standouts. The Conover era's flair for the dramatic showed up often on special teams. The Owls returned 3 kickoffs for touchdowns in 1973, but none were more dramatic than Carl Swerk's long-distance shocker with 2 minutes left that led the Owls to an upset win over Texas A&M. Despite his best efforts, Conover could not sustain his early momentum, and in 1976, Rice continued to look for more offensive explosiveness on that side of the ball. Homer Rice had been a respected developer of quarterbacks who had been a prime candidate when Conover was hired. He came to Rice determined to turn the run-dominated Southwest Conference on its ear, a desire that was only heightened by the presence of a gunslinger in the making already on the Rice campus. Tommy Kramer had come to Rice as one of the more heralded throwing quarterbacks in Texas high school history. In his first 3 seasons, he had shown flashes of brilliance, but it wasn't until Homer Rice had witnessed him firsthand during spring practice that he knew he had the perfect candidate for the job.
He says, but after watching film of you, he says, I'll tell you what, he says, you're this far away from being an All-American quarterback and a first-round pick. And he says, you follow these drills that I give you, and he says, I'll guarantee you, you'll be a first-round pick. I said, that's good enough for me.
From the first snap of the 1976 season, the Rice Owls filled the air with leather in a manner never before seen in the history of the Southwest Conference. Kramer threw for 319 yards and 4 touchdowns in the opener against Utah and kept firing each week until he became the first conference passer to top 3,000 yards in a season, finishing with 3,317, the second highest total in NCAA history at that time. He compiled 4 of the top 8 single-game totals in conference history, finishing with a 409-yard effort in the season finale against Houston.
I can read the papers every week and see where I'm at in the standings as far as passing and all that. And I pretty much led the nation throughout the year in yardage and touchdown passes. And so it, I had a sense of what it was, but that wasn't going to keep me from working harder.
Despite the Owls' 3-8 record, Kramer earned consensus All-American honors and finished 5th in the voting for the Heisman Trophy. Kramer and his receivers, including David Hauser, established passing records that would stand for over 30 years. But lightning would not strike twice for Homer Rice, who could not find a replacement capable of running his offense as Kramer had done during the year of the Rice Air Corps. Homer Rice's tenure began a stretch of 13 years in which the Owls were guided by 4 different head coaches. Ray Alborn, who had joined the Owls staff in 1972 under Al Conover, became the only Rice graduate to assume the role of head football coach when he succeeded Homer Rice in 1978. He would have the longest tenure of the 4. His best season came in 1980 when he led the Owls to a 5-6 overall record and a 4-4 mark in the Southwest Conference. All 4 wins came on the road, the last a 35-7 stunner over Houston in the Astrodome. The following year, Alborn was 3-5 in the Southwest Conference, but a loss in the finale to Houston started a 17-game conference losing streak that ended Alborn's time on the sidelines after the 1983 season.
Ray came along as the momentum of losing had kind of taken root here, and the recruiting was getting harder, and the schedule was getting tougher. So I think it was just a situation where coaching couldn't turn it around.
Alborn was followed by Watson Brown and Jerry Burnt, who each found only modest success in their tenures on the South Main sideline. Despite the modest win totals, there were individual talents wearing the blue and gray, a fact borne out by their play in the NFL. Earl Cooper and Darrell Grant went on to long and successful NFL careers, including Super Bowl rings with the San Francisco 49ers and Washington Redskins, respectively. Safety Michael Downs was a key member of the Dallas Cowboys' doomsday defense. Two-way player Donald Hollis went on to play quarterback in the NFL. Steve Kidd earned All-American honors, and Quentin Roper and Courtney Hall were all-conference performers at their positions.
Coach Auburn and the staff did enough for us to compete at a high level and put us in position that if we was going to stand out, we would get ready for the next level.
In the wake of the departure of Jerry Burnt as head coach, the list of applicants knew full well the challenge that awaited them in Houston. A program that had once frequently flown in the national top 10 had now gone 25 years without a season over 500. The Owls needed a spark of energy and confidence, and it came from someone whose defenses had never allowed more than 2 touchdowns by the Owls in his 5 years at Arkansas. Fred Goldsmith had once stymied Owls' hopes, but now those same coaching skills, fueled by a tireless energy and fronted by a winning smile and engaging personality, soon were causing recruits throughout the region to reconsider their initial hesitation about casting their lot with the Owls. Goldsmith's debut as the Owls head coach against SMU was somewhat overshadowed by the fact that it was the Mustangs' first game back after the NCAA's death penalty, and on the surface, a 2-8-1 finish might not have been the indicator some had hoped. But a late season 6-3 win at Baylor, in which the Owls showcased the same defensive tenacity that was the cornerstone of Goldsmith's Arkansas teams, would prove to be a turning point in the eyes of many. The 1990 season saw the Owls introduce a distinctive new look on the field, switching to a blue helmet with owl wings on each side. The new look was accompanied by a major promotional push announcing that the Rice Owls had a new set of wings. Such optimism was fueled by the combination by a solid group of seniors and a talented group of underclassmen who were part of Goldsmith's first recruiting haul and had gained valuable experience in 1989. Senior quarterback Donald Hollis had established himself as a threat with both his arms and legs, a threat that was bolstered by an exciting talent at running back in sophomore Trevor Cobb. Cobb had burst onto the scene, setting a freshman rushing record in 1989. On the defensive side, sophomore nose guard Matt Sine led an attacking swarm that was relentless and inspired by the relentless play and leadership of undersized linebacker O.J. Brigance. Rice opened the year winning 2 of 3 non-conference games, gave Goldsmith a triumphant return to Fayetteville with a 19-11 win, and after a 30-28 win over SMU, the Owls were poised to post their first winning season since 1963 before falling to Baylor by a single point.
We played hard against Texas, we played hard against Houston, just it never fell our way. It's hard to turn things around, and Fred really believed, and we believed in Fred, and it turned out great for us.
Brigance would leave Rice as the school's all-time leader in tackles and a 2-time All-Southwest Conference selection. He would prove doubting pro scouts wrong and eventually play on the Baltimore Ravens Super Bowl championship team. While he left campus in 1990, his impact was not lost on those who assumed leadership in his absence.
OJ was very intense, practice, off the field, during the game, and he had an approach to the game that everyone wanted to copy. You knew he was going to be destined for greatness, and whatever he chose, whether it was football or business, you knew he was destined for greatness because, first of all, he was going to outwork everybody, and he was going to outsmart everybody, and he was someone you wanted on your side, and just a fine man for sure.
Driven by the knowledge that a winning season had come so close, the 1991 Owls took to the field looking to complete the mission. While that goal would have to wait one more year, the 91 campaign would have its own claim to fame thanks to the fast feet and darting running style of Trevor Cobb. The junior running back tormented opponents, gashing them for nearly 1,700 yards on the ground, and Cobb became the first Owl to step to the podium at a national awards ceremony when he was named the winner of the Doak Walker Award. In a tumultuous 20 years, Rice had seen its foundation shaken by a series of coaching changes, each in search of the elusive chemistry to return the Owls to their previous level of success. In those 20 years, a pair of Owls had fashioned individual seasons that continued to withstand the test of time, while others moved on to create memorable moments in the NFL. At the same time, countless others have leveraged their competitive experiences into successful post-football ventures. But all remain united in one goal: to see Rice once again celebrating victories on repeated Saturdays in the fall. The next 20 years would provide emphatic emphasis that such a pursuit was not only attainable, but essential to broadening the image of Rice to an even wider audience. In the 3 years since he had first stepped onto the Rice campus, Fred Goldsmith had brought the Owls tantalizingly close to ending the drought that had seen a generation of Rice Owls fans and graduates not experience a winning season. But high hopes for the 1992 season were quickly challenged after losses to Air Force and Duke to open the year. 2 weeks later, a heartbreaking 23-21 loss to Texas in the Southwest Conference opener left the Owls at 1-3. But Goldsmith would not let his Owls fall victim to the apparently dashed expectations. The Owls righted the ship to win 4 of the next 5 conference games, setting the stage for a non-conference battle with Navy at Rice Stadium in late November, with a winning season just 60 minutes away.
And really it felt like by the time we got to 92, and early on, it was tough early on. We lost our first 2 games, but we really felt like we were a really good team, and that was the year to get the thing done, and we got it done.
The following year, it again came down to the final home game of the season to secure a winning campaign, and the Owls again delivered, dispatching their crosstown rivals Houston 37-7. The win brought the Bayou Bucket back to Rice for only the 4th time in the 20 years since the Touchdown Club of Houston had created it as a symbol of victory in the game. Few realized it at the time, but the Owls' resounding victory that November day would draw the curtain on the one-sided nature of the series. With Rice winning 7 of the next 15, the Bucket became a true rivalry game, a celebration of college football in Houston for all to enjoy.
Fred's a great football coach, a great defensive specialist for Hatfield. I think he had the support of the university, and all things considered, did a great job of beginning to get the ball rolling with 2 winning seasons.
After guiding the Owls to back-to-back winning campaigns, Fred Goldsmith decided to accept the head coaching position at Duke, leaving behind an opportunity far more realized than it had been for many of his predecessors. The irony was that the man who was selected to follow in Goldsmith's footsteps had been his boss at Arkansas before he came to Rice. Ken Hatfield had been a winner at every stop of his coaching career, fashioning winners at Air Force and Arkansas before moving on to Clemson, where despite restoring the honor of a program that had been tarnished by scandal, he could never win the favor of his fan base. Goldsmith's departure provided Hatfield the chance to come back to a conference he knew well, and he jumped at the chance.
Having coached against them here in '84 through '89 when I was at Arkansas during that time, it was always our toughest game. For whatever reason, Rice, just where they came in the schedule, the way they played, they always had good solid coaching. It always was a very tough game. I liked the people and liked the situation, and so we decided to go to Rice.
Hatfield knew his return to the Southwest Conference was going to be short-lived, as in March of 1994, 4 members of the league, Texas, Texas A&M, Texas Tech, and Baylor, announced they were abandoning the conference that had defined Texas football for nearly 80 years. As short-lived as it was, Hatfield's return to the Southwest Conference would give the Owls one more moment to savor. A proponent of an option-based rushing attack, dependent less on individual talent than on a cohesive unit, Hatfield had flourished at Air Force, and his style had been a counterpoint to the growing move towards passing attacks among his conference rivals at Arkansas and Clemson. The early results in 1994 were not encouraging, as the Owls dropped games with Tulane and Kansas State to open the year, but wins over Iowa State and Texas Tech evened the Owls' mark at 2-2, as Rice prepared to meet an old rival on a unique national stage. Major League Baseball season had come to a premature end in August of 1994 when the players went on strike. The major sports networks were in a mad scramble to replace programming, and ESPN found itself with a huge hole in its Sunday night schedule. Into the void stepped the Southwest Conference, which offered up the Rice-Texas matchup, and ESPN accepted.
It turned out to be big because all the nation got a chance to see the game, and I think that really exposed the nation to Rice University and many opportunities you have on television to sell your program, the university itself. So I think it turned out to be a positive thing.
On a rainy night, one that suited Hatfield's ball control style more than the wide-open attack that 13th-ranked Texas employed, an inspired group of Owls muted the burnt orange in the crowd, jumping out to a quick 9-0 lead. Texas briefly found its footing to take a 10-9 edge, but a second field goal by Matt Hulsman gave the Owls a lead they would never relinquish.
We were up before they even touched the ball. We were up over 2 scores, but we fought. Our defense continued to fight hard all the time, and really they scored on a touchdown pass. It was maybe a little offensive interference on their part right here. You know, we thought it was anyway, but they did score. Other than that, our defense continued to not let them have any kind of drives or momentum.
A touchdown pass from Josh LaRocca to Spencer George extended the lead to 19-10, and an inspired defensive effort led by Andy Kalu and Larry Izzo continued to thwart the Horns at every turn. But in keeping with the history of the series, the final outcome was in doubt until the Owls recovered a last-ditch onside kick attempt to seal the first win over Texas since 1965, creating a legion of fans who claim to have been in the stands that night that far exceeds the actual attendance of 34,000. The following week, the Owls were blanked by Texas A&M, but the parity in the conference that season kept the Owls in the race, and they earned a share of the Southwest Conference title on the final weekend of the season by posting their second straight Bayou Bucket win over Houston. That spirited rivalry and Rice's newfound dominance of the series were another casualty of the end of the Southwest Conference. The Cougars joined Conference USA, and the burgeoning rivalry went on a 3-year hiatus until a non-conference date for both schools was available.
Eventually it got to you keep your gate. That was sort of the trend where it was like, well, it's not a homogeneous group, and things need to change because the big boys wanted to see things change.
We understand what was happening at that time, and I think that we had allowed the program to go down, and so hopefully we learned the lesson and we're going to learn by it. And we're going to build it bigger and better, and ultimately that's what we're going to do.
2 years later, Hatfield had populated his ranks with players ideally suited to his option attack. The Owls' entry into the Western Athletic Conference brought Owls fans a new set of teams and a new set of travel destinations. It also brought them their first 7-win season since 1961, as the Owls won 6 of their last 7 WAC games. 1 year later, the Owls again won 7 games, their first back-to-back seasons with that win total since 1960-61. And Owl fans began to get accustomed to the wide-open brand of football that had made the WAC legendary. They also won a shootout over a Northwestern squad that had won the Big Ten title the year before. The Bayou Bucket returned to the schedule in 1999, and in a nod to the earliest days of the series, became the season opener for Houston and Rice. In 2000, the schools kicked the year off in rousing fashion, with the Owls winning in overtime on a short run by Robbie Beck. The 2001 season was one of anticipation and promise for Owls fans, and that optimism was validated by a second straight win over Houston in the opener and a 2-point win at Duke. The next game on the schedule was a formidable assignment, a date against Nebraska in Lincoln. But as Hatfield was interviewed on Tuesday morning of that week, events were unfolding on the television that would render concerns about the strength of a football opponent moot. As the nation paused to reflect upon the events in New York and their implications, Hatfield and his staff knew that while football was not an immediate priority, it would rapidly become an agent of helping the country return to some sense of normalcy. Since both Nebraska and Rice had open dates the following week, it was determined that their game would be moved to the following Thursday, and the Owls, as the visitor, would be one of the first sports teams to board an airliner after the attacks. It was a story of national interest, and the Owls found themselves with a much larger traveling party than usual.
ESPN came down, they had a big documentary on us, and we had a lot of national exposure. And that was a very emotional moment because we were the first team to play in America, all eyes were on us. They had the flyovers. It was very patriotic. So it was a turning point in our country, and we had national exposure during that time.
After losing to Nebraska, the Owls ripped off 3 straight wins before seeing an amazing comeback at Louisiana Tech fall short in overtime. A loss to David Carr and Fresno State followed, but then wins over Tulsa and UTEP pushed the Owls' win total to 8, their highest total since 1953. It's a win total that football fans today would associate as guaranteeing a bowl berth. But there were far fewer bowls in 2001, and the WAC in particular had few guaranteed slots available. But the Owls were not alone in sitting home that Christmas with a stellar win total. Over the next 4 years, Hatfield's option attack proved to be a potent foe for WAC defenders, but injuries to key components stalled their efforts to challenge for the league title. Despite the struggles, there were moments to savor. In 2004, the Owls fashioned one of their greatest defensive efforts in its history, holding Houston off the scoreboard until the final seconds of the game. Defensive end John Siptak and his teammates harassed Houston quarterback Kevin Cobb into submission, giving new Rice president David Lebron the thrill of capturing the Bayou Bucket in his first year on South Main. In 2005, in an effort to reconnect with traditional Southwest Conference foes such as SMU, TCU, and Houston, as well as lessen some of the economic burdens of the far-flung WAC configuration, Rice said goodbye to the Western Athletic Conference and became a member of Conference USA. The 2005 Owls found the going in their initial trip through Conference USA a difficult one, with the homecoming win over Tulane serving as the final victory of Ken Hatfield's career. The veteran coach, who had led the Owls into competition in 3 conferences, announced the end of his tenure shortly after the end of the season. To replace Hatfield, the Owls settled on a fiery young defensive coordinator who had helped lead Tulsa to a league title. Todd Graham was an abrupt departure from Hatfield, a fact that was evident from the first moments he stepped onto campus.
Todd was an outstanding assistant at Tulsa and had great credentials, great recommendations from people that I've had great respect for. And he came in facing one of the toughest schedules, non-conference schedules, maybe in recorded history. And that didn't deter him in the least.
While his specialty was defense, Graham sought to bring the same kind of wide-open offensive style that was sweeping the country to South Main. To lead that charge, he brought a familiar name to Texas football fans who was just beginning his coaching career. Major Applewhite had built a career that was on par with his name, and his hiring ignited even greater excitement surrounding the 2006 season. As with countless other coaches, Graham and Applewhite knew that the best of intentions for a change of offensive attack were solely dependent on the cast of available talent. On the surface, the likelihood that a suitable triggerman and suitable receivers were in place seemed far-fetched, but they were in place. Chase Clement and Jarrett Dillard had hardly moved the recruiting needle when they were seniors in San Antonio. The offer from Rice was among their few, and after signing day, they met for the first time since they faced off in a freshman football game. The two quickly began to develop a bond. It took Applewhite no time at all to realize that his search for skill position talent was far less formidable than he first thought. Owls' opponents would prove to be a far less quick study, setting the stage for an improbable 2006 season. For the 3rd time in history, a Rice head coach made his debut against Houston. And for the 3rd straight time, the Owls were the underdog. Graham's impact on his team had not been a factor for the odds makers to consider, but the Owls survived a 14-0 start by Houston to score 30 consecutive points by early in the 3rd quarter. Clement was proving to be a perfect fit for the new offensive scheme, while Dillard and running back Quentin Smith were creating headaches for defenders. Houston stormed back to take a 31-30 lead, and an injured Clement tried to rally the Owls one last time before coming up just short. It was a thrilling beginning that whetted the appetite of Owls fans, but a murderous slate of non-conference games made it difficult for most to gauge the true abilities of this team. Consecutive losses to UCLA, Texas, and Florida State left the Owls 0-4. Clement was set to return the next week for a trip to Army, but just as they began preparations for that game, this group of Owls would find themselves challenged in a way no team ever expects to be, when freshman defensive back Dale Lloyd collapsed and later died after a workout.
To be honest with you, I just don't remember preparing that week. I just remember everything being focused about Dale and and us reevaluating some things and remembering that, it brought us close as a team, to know that it's the guys next to you in this locker that are important, we're all brothers.
The stunned team closed ranks and took the field at West Point on the day before Lloyd's funeral and fashioned a performance few could have anticipated, shredding the Cadets 48-14 as Clement returned to action by throwing 5 touchdowns, 3 of them to Dillard. It would be a combination that was repeated over and over in the coming weeks as the Owls fashioned a series of improbable victories to finish the season 7-5, and thanks to Conference USA's multiple bowl affiliations, present Owl fans with their first bowl berth in 45 years. Dillard set an NCAA record by catching a touchdown pass in all 13 games, rising from anonymity to become a finalist for the Biletnikoff Award. The Owls' turnaround had become one of the top stories in college football, and Rice fans look forward to the next chapter. But what they found instead was that for the second time in their history, they would see a head coach leave the program after just 1 season. Graham, who had agreed to a contract extension 3 days earlier, abruptly left to return to Tulsa as head coach, leaving a stunned group of gritty Owls in the lurch and committed recruits uncertain of the program's direction. Most of those recruits were still in high school, but one was already on campus and had attended his first week of classes. James Casey had signed with Rice after spending 4 years on the baseball diamond in the low minors, chasing his dream of pitching in the majors. The challenge of stepping out of a minor league clubhouse and into the classroom of one of the top schools in the country was daunting enough, but now he had to face the added uncertainty of making his transition back to football with a staff that had not even recruited him. With only weeks to go until National Signing Day for recruits, Owls officials had to act quickly to replace Graham. After a search that included members of the stunned team, David Bailiff was introduced as the Owls' 18th head football coach.
The former athletic director called me and asked me to come visit with him about Rice. Initially it jumps out in your mind that what a academic Texas treasure this is, and what a prestigious university that plays Division I football. So, I was very proud and humble when I got the job offered, and it didn't take long for me to say yes.
Bailiff's first spring proved to be an odd affair. The combination of injuries and players who had elected to not return after the grueling 2006 campaign had left the new staff with less than 60 players for spring football. It was hardly an ideal introductory period. Casey, who harbored dreams of playing quarterback, was slotted at defensive end as much because of practice needs as also a true projection of his abilities.
I think I got in on a Monday, and that Wednesday, Coach Graham just out of nowhere just says he's leaving and going to Tulsa. So we were out without a head coach, and I didn't know how the scholarship process worked. I knew he gave me the scholarship, so I thought that my scholarship was gone now since he left. So I was terrified. I thought I had to, gonna have to go somewhere else, but I was shortly informed that I could stay at Rice. So then eventually during the summer, they let me move over to the offensive side, and then of course a lot of stuff happened. I ended up, being featured in the offense my sophomore year and getting a lot of opportunities.
Expectations for the Owls in 2007 were high, given the quick evaluation of the players returning from a team that had reached a bowl game the year before. The reality was the Owls were hardly a complete team, but one that had enjoyed a magical run, most of it on the slender shoulders of Dillard, whose All-American effort had rescued the team time and time again. The return of Dillard and Clement gave rise to great hopes, but the loss of other key players, including Quentin Smith, who had quietly rushed for over 1,000 yards and left as the school's #2 all-time rusher, proved to be far more daunting than most wanted to admit. The Owls opened with 4 straight losses and headed into a Wednesday night game with Southern Miss with an injury-depleted team. With a national audience watching on ESPN, the Owls stunned the Golden Eagles, and in the process, a legend was born. Casey had been moved from his springtime defensive end assignment to offense and had become a featured part of the Owls' short yardage attack. On this night, with the Owls shorthanded, he was called upon to use all of his skills, even those he had just developed the previous spring. In a wild affair, Casey would run, catch, block, and tackle his way to lead the Owls to a 31-29 win. He played 7 different positions in the game, a fact noted nationally because of the unique Wednesday night stage the game offered.
They had another couple injuries on defensive end, and I was just standing around the coach, and because I had the wristband, I was ready to play defensive end. I didn't really know if they were really going to put me in, but I was just standing there, and they turned around and said, "Get in." It was just happened just like that. It wasn't no time to think. It was just going to the game. You know, a guy like me coming from minor league baseball and then going to play college football, and all of a sudden they're talking about me nationally. That's when I think that was really a starting point of my career, kind of my breakout game, and I ended up, you know, I play in the NFL now, so it ended up, you know, that was kind of the starting point. Those at Southern Miss and all the national attention I got from that game, and it was definitely a game I'll never forget.
As Casey's role continued to develop, the Owls found their offensive footing over the last half of 2007. And with all the key offensive pieces returning, 2008 was eagerly anticipated. The Owls opened the season with a pair of conference wins, including an improbable win at Memphis on an interception return in the game's final seconds. A road game at Vanderbilt was played under the uncertainty of the impact Hurricane Ike was having as it came ashore in Houston. And 3 weeks later, Rice stood at 3-3. Again, it was Southern Miss who found themselves the opponent in a pivotal game for the Owls. And Rice's 45-40 win was the start of a 7-game winning streak that saw Clement, Dillard, and Casey rewrite the Rice record book and end with a happy group of teammates celebrating a Texas Bowl championship with a win over Western Michigan. Dillard smashed the NCAA career record for touchdown receptions, bettering the previous total by 8. He combined with Clement to produce the most touchdown receptions by a duo in history. And in an odd twist of fate, they switched roles late in the third quarter, with Dillard throwing a TD pass to Clement as the Owls continued to pile on the points. Casey simply put together the single greatest receiving season in school history, catching 111 passes for over 1,300 yards. Having completed everything he could on the college level, Casey set his eyes on the NFL, and his improbable story took another odd turn as the hometown Houston Texans took him in the 5th round, assuring Owls fans more opportunities to watch him continue to develop his skills. With the Owls' success on the field, a number of area players began to rethink their initial decisions to play football out of state and began to transfer back to Houston. At the same time, interest in joining a program that was excelling both on the field and in the classroom continued to grow. The Owls were honored in 2010 by the American Football Coaches Association for their outstanding graduation rate, and the football team continued to be ranked at the top of every NCAA standard for their academic excellence. What had begun in 1912 as a mechanism to help promote and brand a fledgling institution of higher learning continued to deliver upon that initial mission statement as both the university and football program contemplated their second centuries. That vision for the future includes plans for a revitalization of the facilities that George R. Brown had been inspired to build in 1950. At the Rice Athletics Public Forum in January of 2012, Rice President David Lebrun said the work would be a valuable asset in attracting the next generation of Owls to South Main.
I'm excited about the plan that, if you haven't already seen, you'll see here tonight for football. It calls for a new football facility for our student athletes, and actually not just our football athletes, and football staff, and an enhancement to the stadium. The new football facility will demonstrate Rice's commitment to successful athletics and intercollegiate Division I-A sports, but it depends on raising funds from Rice Owl fans and supporters. Our commitment and the quality of the total experience and opportunity we offer to our student athletes will enable us to recruit the most talented student athletes who are difference makers on and off the field, at Rice and beyond Rice.
From Phil Arbuckle to Jess Neely, Ken Hatfield to David Bailiff, Dickie Magle's historic 95-yard touchdown run in the Cotton Bowl to Rice's 38-14 win in the Texas Bowl. There have been exciting moments and highlights that have made up the first 100 years. But through it all, the one constant that will remain at the epicenter of Rice's football philosophy, today and always, will be academics first and doing things the right way. The Rice way.
This is the story of an incredible, amazing football team. The 1976 Rice University Owls of the Southwest Conference. It was a team that gave the fans a maximum of excitement and entertainment. But the most important contribution by this dedicated group of Rice Owl football players and coaches was the start of a program for bigger and better things to come in the future. The new Rice head coach, with the apt name of Homer Rice, in his first season sounded a warning to the Southwest Conference and all NCAA college football that the Owls are back, ready to make a move to high standings and rankings and big crowds again in their splendid 70,000-seat Rice Stadium on the beautiful Rice campus. Let's be realistic. You don't jump to the top overnight. But what a start this group made. Tommy Kramer was the key man. He won consensus All-American quarterback honors against fantastic odds by brilliant play, leadership, and so many statistical records it would take an hour to review them all. Suffice to say, he led the nation in both passing and total offense. The senior from San Antonio had one of the great season performances of all Southwest Conference history. How about Homer Rice? He took over a grid program struggling to make a go of it. But he hadn't been a coach on the field for 7 years while serving as athletic director at University of North Carolina. Could he come back? Did he ever? The Rice Owls of Homer Rice merely produced the top passer in the nation, same as he had done in his previous coaching season of 1968. They scored more points than any Rice University team in over 20 years and gave the fans of Rice and all college football more thrills than they had had in a long, long time. His positive attitude philosophy, triggered by his new attitude technique program, made an auspicious debut in 1976. In 3 games, the total offense for both teams combined was over 1,000 yards. Kramer completed a Southwest Conference all-time record 269 passes of 501 attempts for a record, 3,317 yards, and 21 touchdowns, plus running for 4 more touchdowns. James Sykes was just 1 pass away from a tie for the national lead for receiving. Doug Cunningham was the national leader much of the time until a severe finger injury sidelined him in late season. David Hauser set a school record with 931 yards receiving on 52 receptions, one of the all-time highs for yardage in conference history. Kenneth Roy set an all-time Southwest Conference record with 9 touchdown passes caught. Sykes also was the top rusher and was 3rd in all NCAA rankings in kickoff returns. Kramer received terrific protection for a dedicated offensive line led by Danny Johnson, and with help from several other fine players, did a yeoman job for him. Even though the defense had problems triggered by an unusually high quota of injuries, they had some good moments, and strong recruiting will help the Owls' needs in this area. But let's get on to some of the many big plays of a memorable and exciting year for the Rice Owls, a team representing the smallest school in the NCAA Division I ranks that plays the toughest schedule by far of small schools of high academic standing that compete well in the major college ranks. The opening game at Rice Stadium with Utah. Right after the kickoff, Utah tries a pass. Senior cornerback Artie Seegers intercepts and returns it to the Utah 5-yard line. The first offensive play of the season. Kramer fires to Kenneth Roy, touchdown. And these 2 fine seniors in postseason action after this epic start play together under Coach Rice in the Blue-Gray game and the Senior Bowl game in Alabama. About 57,000 fans saw the Owls at home in Rice Stadium against the famous Darrell Royal Texas Longhorns. Texas won, but the Owls gave the fans some thrills as Kramer completed 34 passes for 397 yards, and this one did not count. Just at the game's end, TK hit David Hauser at the sideline, And had it held up, he would have tied a conference record for yards passing in a game. It was so close. Earlier, Kramer had connected on this 14-yard touchdown shot to Doug Cunningham, a great receiver, also from San Antonio, as is Kramer, and Cunningham was a solid All-America candidate for 1977. When Texas Tech came to Rice Stadium, the Red Raiders were at a season peak of proficiency en route to a co-championship of the conference. But the Owls had their moments in this one, such as this pair of touchdown passes by Tommy Kramer. First, a 6-yard shot to David Hauser, and then a 6-yard scoring pass to the veteran Kenneth Roy. The Owls made the long trek to the Ozarks to play Arkansas in October, and it was quite an event. Supposed to get all but run out of the stadium, the Rice defense had its greatest effort as they shut down the Razorbacks for a half with some defensive plays such as this interception by Don Parrish and a sack of quarterback Ron Calcagni by Dwight Moyer. Then this spectacular running play by James Sykes sparked the Owls to a first-half 7-0 lead. The senior from Cold Spring raced 39 yards for a score. In the second half, the Owls had this dazzling 30-yard pass from Kramer to David Hauser, the sophomore flanker from Dallas, who came on at this point in mid-season for a sensational stretch drive that gave him the Rice record for yards in receiving. It was on a cold, gray day at Aggieland that the Rice offense had perhaps its finest hour, even though a rugged Texas A&M team won the game with its own strong, ground-oriented offense. But what a day for Kramer and the Owl Air Corps as the receiving group for TK's passes came to be known this season. Here is Kramer hitting Hauser for a spectacular pass and run play of 45 yards early in the game. On this day, the Owls were to score 34 points and make 376-yard passing and 470 yards total offense against perhaps the best defensive unit in the whole nation. Now we see Kramer run one in on a quarterback sneak from the 1-yard line. It had been set up by this pass to freshman Earl Cooper to the lip of the cup. The defense set up this score we'll see in a moment on a blocked punt by linebacker Mike Collier that gave the Owls good field position. And soon after, Kramer hit Cunningham for a 15-yard touchdown pass. With several games to go, this 12th touchdown pass of the year was a Rice season record for scoring passes in one campaign. A bit later, Cunningham caught this pass to set up another Kramer sneak touchdown. And this fumble recovery by Dennis Blair for the defense after a hit by Collier set up this scoring pass by Rice from Kramer to Hauser for 14 yards. Perhaps the brightest day of all for the Owls was quite appropriately the homecoming game with a scrappy Southern Methodist University team. Sports Illustrated magazine had a writer on hand to detail the Owls' Tommy Kramer exploits, and did he ever give them a story? It was a dramatic game that saw Rice and the Owl Air Corps rally to win in the final stages. Kramer hits Hauser for 20 yards on this play. Then he comes back with this shot to sophomore Guy Booker of Houston Yates to the 9-yard line. That led to this Kramer quarterback keeper for a Rice score. Next, Kramer connects with sophomore Charlie Taylor of Fort Worth on this dazzling 27-yard reception to the SMU 7-yard line. That sets up this scoring pass to Kenneth Roy, one of his 9 touchdown passes of the year. Here is James Sykes on a scoring run of 13 yards. And then Dallas Skyline product Billy Neal drives in for 2 yards and a score. But setting up that touchdown was this Dallas Sunset product David Hauser catch of a 37-yard pass play to the 2. The Rice Owls made a late season visit to Florida to play a strong bowl-bound University of Florida team in Gainesville. It was sunny and warm on arrival, but a chilly and steady rain came in for game day at Florida Field. The conditions were the worst possible for the famous Owl Air Corps and Tommy Kramer, but the remarkable Rice aerial game was successful, even with the adverse conditions. Florida outscored the Owls and played well, but Tommy Kramer and his receivers, especially David Hauser, received many accolades from the fans and newsmen in the Southeastern Conference area. Kramer graphically showed why Gator coach Doug Dickey had said at a pep rally on Friday night, "Tomorrow we face the best passer in the world, a real All-American in Tommy Kramer." Ignoring the elements, here we see Kramer connect with Hauser for 37 yards to the Gator 25. A few plays later, this pass to Guy Booker was just short of the goal line. But James Sykes took it in, scoring on this run. On this day, Hauser of Rice caught more passes in one game than any receiver in the nation for a game the entire season, 14. Here is one to Hauser for 22 yards. And a bit later, a shot to David is for 13 yards on a Rice scoring drive that cut a Florida lead to 19-14 just before halftime. This Kramer to Hauser aerial gained 11 yards. Tommy fires this one for 21 yards to his sophomore receiver, who has 2 more years to catch passes for the Rice Owls. And then the final Owl touchdown was a momentous one, for it was to Kenneth Roy to set an all-time Southwest Conference record of 9 touchdown passes caught in a season. In the last game of the season, their 11th contest in a row with no open dates, the Owls played a tough crosstown and Southwest Conference rival University of Houston in Rice Stadium. In his last college game, Kramer clinched All-American honors as he completed 27 passes for an amazing 409 yards and 3 touchdowns against the best pass defense in the conference. In a moment, we'll see those 3 scoring plays. But first, another feature of the game. All season, the Rice offensive line gave Kramer terrific protection. He was sacked just 15 times with over 500 pass attempts, a fantastic record. Concentrate here on Houston's 78, a star noted for getting to the passer. And now to wrap up this 1976 Rice highlight film, let's see Tommy Kramer on those scoring tosses against a tough rival in the closing game of his Owl career. Coach Homer Rice put in a tricky maneuver that helped little Joey DiQuinzio get wide open to get this perfect pass for a 62-yard scoring play. Then we pick up a 23-yard pass that set up the second Rice score. This was to fellow senior Kenneth Roy, who joins TK in the postseason All-Star play action in the Blue Gray and Senior Bowl games. This pass to the Cougar 20 broke the Southwest Conference season pass yardage record for Kramer. The second score itself was this 11-yard look-in shot to Hauser. The final play we show was a real record setter. 80 yards from Kramer to fellow senior James Sykes with some nifty running by the lad from Cold Spring, who missed by only 1 reception, tying for the national lead in receiving. This was the longest scoring pass of Kramer's career and his 21st touchdown pass of the season. And so this season came to a close, but a new and bright era of Rice football under Homer Rice is only beginning. Many seniors bowed out with this game, the great number 9, Tommy Kramer. stellar receivers number 85, Roy, and number 32, Sykes. The great protector, Danny Johnson, number 74, and such others as John Standish and Steve Moore. And co-captain Mark Bacalo, number 51, at defensive linebacker. Another fine linebacker, number 38, Eddie Collins. And a splendid tackle, number 97, Jeff Rose. The big guy was hampered by injuries a lot of the time, but he gave a great effort all year. But such stars as Cunningham and Hauser and many more are due back in 1977. Make your plans now to follow the Owls next fall and enjoy more of America's favorite and finest sport, college football, with the Rice Owls at Rice Stadium.